Daniel sat across from the CEO in the silent, opulent office. The air was thick with unspoken questions. "He wanted to give it to you," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. "He wrote it during his last week here, right before he retired." The CEO, a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, looked smaller in that moment, his expensive suit doing little to hide his vulnerability. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished mahogany desk. "Then why didn't he?" he asked, his voice strained. "If it was so important, why did he keep it all this time?" Daniel took a deep, shaky breath, the memory clearly painful. "Because you were too busy," he said, the words landing like small, sharp stones. "He tried, he tried twice. He told me about it. The first time he walked into your office, the letter clutched in his hand. You were on a call, pacing back and forth, shouting numbers and deadlines. You didn't even look at him. You just waved your hand, a dismissive gesture, and he backed out." The CEO flinched, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He remembered 1,000 such moments, 100 such gestures. They were the currency of his power, the tools of his efficiency. Now they felt like accusations. "The second time," Daniel continued, his gaze fixed on a point just past the CEO's shoulder, "was a few days later. It was late. He saw the light on in your office and thought maybe, just maybe, it was a quiet moment." He knocked softly. You were hunched over your computer, your face illuminated by the screen. You looked up, and your expression was irritated, annoyed at the interruption. Before he could even say a word, you just shook your head and pointed to the door. So he left. Again, the CEO lowered his head, the weight of that simple, repeated rejection settling on him. Shame burned in his chest. He saw the old man's face in his mind, kind and patient, standing at his door, only to be turned away without a word. How many other people had he waved away? How many other important moments had he dismissed in his relentless pursuit of what? The company was failing anyway. "But that's not the real reason," Daniel said, his voice pulling the CEO from his spiral of regret. The CEO looked up, confused. Daniel's eyes, tired but clear, met his. "That's just the excuse. The real reason he didn't give it to you then was because he knew you wouldn't listen." The words were not an attack, but a statement of fact, delivered with a quiet certainty that was more damning than any shout. He knew you, you see. He'd watched you for years. He saw the fire in you when you started, the big dreams. And he saw how that fire turned into something else. Something harder. He knew that back then your ears were closed. You were on top of the world. What could an old janitor possibly tell you that you didn't already know? The CEO remained silent, the truth of Daniel's words undeniable. He wouldn't have listened. He would have scanned the letter, dismissed it as the ramblings of a sentimental old man, and tossed it in the bin, annoyed at the waste of his precious time. He was a man who dealt in data, in projections, in tangible results. He had no time for feelings or nostalgia. His father-in-law had known that. "He knew you wouldn't see the value in his words then," Daniel affirmed, as if reading his thoughts. "To you, it would have been just paper. Just another distraction from the next big deal, the next quarterly report." He knew that for his words to have any power, you had to be ready to hear them. Truly ready. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression softening with a profound, inherited sadness. "He didn't keep this letter from you. He saved it for you?" The distinction was crucial, a shift in perspective that changed everything. It wasn't an act of cowardice or neglect. It was an act of foresight, of incredible, patient love. He saw this coming, not the specifics, maybe, but he saw the cracks in the foundation you were building. He knew that a company built only on ambition, without a heart, would eventually crumble. He hoped, with all his heart, that it never would. But he prepared for it just in case. A heavy silence descended upon the room once more. The letter lay on the desk between them, no longer just a piece of paper, but a lifeline thrown across a chasm of time and misunderstanding. "He saved this letter for the moment you needed it most," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. He knew a day would come when the numbers wouldn't add up, when your confidence would be shattered, when you'd be sitting right where you are now, lost and with no idea what to do next. He knew that only then, When everything you built was on the verge of collapse, would you finally be humble enough to listen? Not to a CEO, not to a consultant, but to an old janitor who loved your wife, and who, in his own way, loved you too. The CEO stared at the letter. It felt impossibly heavy. It was a final gift from a man he had barely noticed, a man who had seen him more clearly than anyone. It was a message from the past, delivered at the precise moment it could save the future. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. He looked at Daniel, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time in a very long time, he felt a flicker of something he had long forgotten. Hope. He was finally ready to listen. The janitor's final, most important job was about to be completed. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that makes you think and feel. We'll see you in the next one.